Alright then, let's do some inking. And this time I'm actually going to attempt to stay on the left side of the page so that I don't smear my hand across the ink, but we'll see what happens. When people watch me work, they get freaked out how I ink because I'm usually very nonchalant about it. Which, you know, I still do freak out about inking, but it's much less than it used to be. I know that for certain. For me, I think inking is usually more relaxing because you're finally encapsulating your art in a medium that won't go away. At least wise, it's hard to get away. Hard to remove, I should say. So this is the stage where, if I'm going to talk the least, it's probably going to be this one. By the way, for those of you watching, welcome to a new day. We have traveled into the future. Well, really the past by the time you're watching this, but still. It's a new day for me. I don't know, maybe it's a new day for you. Maybe that's something you could try. Watch this movie, or this video in as much real time as you can. Every time you see a cut, just go to the next day. Could be a fun way of watching it, I don't know. Try to go light on hatching, just because I know that when it comes time to scan it and then paint it digitally, sometimes the hatches don't look as good as they do in the inking stage. And I think some of that's just perspective from like moving from traditional to digital, and I think the other part of that is also like after you finish, like in the moment while you're inking, maybe it's like really good. But then afterwards, when you're working with it again, maybe you're not as happy with it. I've had people ask me why I don't use Micron. I've talked about it before, but I think it bears repeating. I do use Micron, but generally speaking, I'll pretty much always use dip pen over Micron because I think the Micron pens are good, but I don't like how they wear out so fast, because the amount of inking that I'm doing basically just wears them out like over a period of a week. Or at least that's what it feels like. It feels like I go and I get some, and then like by the end of the week I'm like, alright, I need to go back to the store and get more. Which I hate doing because the nearest store for me that provides microns is miles away. It's almost 30 minutes from where I'm at in the world, and I don't love that. Not that I don't enjoy driving and going into town and going to art stores, but I don't like when that time could be spent drawing. So I just buy a bottle of ink and then replace my nibs every year or so, and then I'm good. So that's why I use nib pens over microns most of the time. I keep microns around just in case, but generally speaking, you'll see me use nib pens. And I think the nib pens also get like a much better line than microns. Every time I pick up this brush pen though, and I kid you not, I just start like looking for places I can use it, because I love using it. But I might be a little bit too addicted to it. I might need to slow down. Because every time I pick it up, I'm like, I can ink the world with this. It's like, maybe chill out a little bit. You'll see me when I'm doing the edges of the drawing, or where I know that there's nothing touching. So like here on this arm, I'm pushing a little bit harder, getting a bit more ink on the nib, so I can have this nice thick outline. Basically that's so that the character stands out, and it also helps later on when I'm coloring. It helps show where the edges of my character are, so it's easier to make that selection digitally. You always want to keep your process in mind, because especially if you're the only one that's working on the comic, you know, it's just you, and you're just setting yourself up for a little bit less work later. If you're working with somebody else, you really have to try to keep them in mind and be considerate. Be kind to your help. There we go. It's not too bad. Let me just go ahead and fill in that tiny little area. I do wish there were more fantasy comics out there. I'm sure there's plenty that I'm not seeing. And what I mean by fantasy comics isn't like, oh, you know, like a Sword and Sandals Barbarian, or like Conan the Barbarian kind of situation. Although I think there's definitely a time and place for those stories. Like just a good story that happens to be in a fantasy setting, I feel like is enough to get me excited and to get me enthusiastic. But I think there's a frightening lack of that. There's a frightening lack of anything but like superhero comics recently. And I think like the reaction to that, like what people are trying to do in order to, you know, oh, we're not making another superhero comic, is to make an anti-hero comic, which is still a superhero comic, but it's different. We're not like other comic, you know, writers. We made Superman evil. Like, they've been making Superman evil since, you know, 80s. Probably even before that. So you're really not breaking new ground here. And it's just, it's frustrating, because it's like, I enjoy reading, I enjoy reading manga because so much of the time, all of those stories are unique in some way. Not all of them, I should say. The isekai genre is a whole nother rant that I'll go on someday, I promise. But one of the things that I've noticed about like the American comics industry versus the manga scene is, like, in manga you can have like a story about somebody cooking, and that's interesting. You can have a story about, you know, somebody who has a fairly dull job, and they can find a way to make that interesting. And I'm not just talking about like slice of life stuff. Like Delicious in Dungeon is like a really good example of where the entire world building is just kind of them. The main characters going through this dungeon and discovering what monsters are edible because they need to survive on this quest that they're on, and it's very interesting. And it's like it's a fun series because not only are you probably going to enjoy it if you're a big fan of fantasy and especially like TTRPGs like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, but you'll also enjoy it if you enjoy cooking and you enjoy food, or nutrition is something they talk a lot about. That I remember watching it and thinking, well, this is just kind of almost delightfully laid back, while at the same time there's plenty of action and fights and such like that, and things that the adventurers have to avoid or confront. And that's what I'm getting at is, in America, I don't think that comic or that story would ever get made, just because it doesn't have anything to do with superheroes or pre-existing characters or movie or time travel or any of the other played out tropes. I think the only thing that like so far we've been able to bring to the table in modern comics outside of superheroes is like the serial killer and horror genre. And I'm not going to say that those aren't interesting comics to read, but I do have to say, like, it is a shame that we cannot branch out into other genres or other types of storytelling, just because we started off comics as a medium that's kind of disposable and mostly for kids, and now that we're in this era where all this other entertainment can thrive, we can't quite figure out what to do with comic books. That's unfortunate. And I feel like for me, I'm not really interested in writing or reading another superhero story unless it's like really well done, or pseudo superhero story is kind of what I like to call them. Like I was reading a story, and it's like, it's not about superheroes, but it's in a world where there are superheroes, so it's kind of hard to ignore, and it feels like kind of like and I can't really blame them for this, so I guess I'll just say it's preference on my part. But one of the things that they did, and that I've also done, so again, I can't blame them, is like everything can be explained away by just the superheroes in the world. So it's like if something happens or if the plot needs to move forward, they're just like, it's like, Metro Man, he came in and he wrecked the subway, so now we can't, go to work. Or I don't know, whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think it was just kind of... I'll say this. I don't think that the superhero genre is bad. I just think that it needs to evolve. Let's put it that way. But yeah, about like using your world setting to kind of just like solve all your problems. I've done that with Magic before, so I'm not hasty to criticize that, because I'm definitely, the way that I write fantasy, at least, a lot of the times my answer to people that ask me, why do you write, fantasy comics, is like, well, because it's easier. And then they get kind of like upset or confused, and they're like, well, I thought fantasy was really, complicated, or how dare you call it simple? I've been writing my fantasy novel for years. And I say, well, that's probably because we're doing it in two different ways, because the way that I see fantasy isn't like, I don't have to write something that like Tolkien would be, proud of, or I'm not trying to write a novel or really, break new ground or have a unique magic system or something like that. Although a lot of times I do come up with those things. But like one of the main things that like I can kind of fall back on is the fact that if there's magic in the world, I can just say, yeah, that's how the magic works here. And then just like blame the magic. And I'm not saying that's a good thing for people to follow. Don't, you know, don't get lazy if you're a writer. But at the same time, it's a world where there's magic, so don't discount that and don't completely ignore it. That's something I appreciated about the Witcher books and the way that they used magic. It was almost more like in the early books. I don't know. I haven't finished the series, but what I liked about the series a lot was like how it was almost like a folk tale, where magic could do everything, but you know, having access to magic is a difficult process, or in other ways not attainable. Or, a story would get, resolved or have an interesting twist because of magic. So that's a way of thinking about it that's, I think, conducive to the storytelling and world building. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm criticizing anyone that uses the, oh, but there's magic in the world, so I can do whatever I want. I've definitely used that before. I think it comes down to how you cover your tracks on that one. Something I like to do when I'm inking is I like to go in and it's like where I know there's going to be shading, so like here. Let me just get this outline. I'll do the outline of the shape, but I know that I'm going to be doing shading with ink. So I'll get the outline figured out, and then I'll kind of outline where the shape is going to be. Just like these little kind of small wavy lines. Very light, very easy. Nothing too committal yet, and then I'll go in and I'll... Maybe if I'm doing hatching, I'll kind of hatch in where I want it. Like that. And that's a nice trick that I learned from watching professional comic artists, and I really like using that, because then if I want to, I can come back in here and I can fill this with a dark color, or if I'm not, moving on to the coloring stage, if I can come back in with a brush, and I can ink that in and fill that in with black. So like over here, I know I'm gonna have a line here, probably going up a little smoother than that. But then all of this is probably gonna be dark, so dark or full on blacked out with ink. I've heard it said, I don't remember which comic artist it was, but when in doubt, black it out. And that's a purely comic book style, I feel like, choice. I don't feel like it for everything, you have to black out large area of your drawings. Just because I feel like when it comes to... Well, let me put it this way. Some of my favorite comics are a mixture of hatching and blacking out techniques. And what I mean by that is just kind of like what I'm doing here, is I'm working my way up this form with these nice light hatches, but then I'll come back here, kind of where I think the darkest part of that coat would be. And I'll go in with a brush and I'll just darken that in, fill that in completely to maybe the edge right there. And that gives a nice illusion of form and a nice kind of classical understanding of lighting. And it's not necessary, you know, for every inking style to follow this. There's plenty of other inking styles. This is just what I'm going for with this drawing in particular. And just in general, because I like it. I like using a lot of ink. I'm kind of a glutton for punishment like that because, you know, truly it'd be a lot easier if I just went in and I did like some simple line art and then maybe let the colors do a little bit more work, but not me. It has to be more difficult than that for some reason. You can break a few rules when it comes to lighting. Like, I know that my light source is coming in from this direction, kind of like head on. Whereas, like, there's a really strong shadow back here. And I know that, like, not all of the elements here are going to obey that rule. Because eventually I will mess up. I'll try to keep that lighting in mind as much as possible and not mess up. But if I do mess up, there's a lot of techniques that you can use to fix that before you pull out the whiteout. And sometimes you just make conscious decisions anyway to just, you know, leave it, because maybe it looks better. And that's the nice thing about comic art, just art in general. You can, and the masters will tell you this anyway, but you can go ahead and just ignore what reality says, or maybe what science says, to make a nice drawing. And that's all because of you know, the artistic eye and the appreciation that maybe the audience has, rather than maybe somebody who's looking for something that's 100% realistic all the time. And that's why, like, when I would work with painters or with other artists, they weren't really interested in realism. They would still study what was, you know, if they were painting an apple, they would have an apple out on their desk, or they would have a lot of images of apples, and, you know, they would take the time to understand what an apple is before they would go in and paint. But at no point would they try to replicate every single bit of that fruit. They would always, you know, sample bits of reality to ensure that they were communicating. But at the same time, they knew that what they were creating was an illusion of an apple on a canvas. So what they did was they took their knowledge of whatever apple or whatever they were painting, and then they would use the filter of their experience and the styles that they've worked in and the message they wanted to create in the piece to create that artwork. That's basically just how art works. It's a window into your experience and into your understanding of the craft. So, but above all, it's a communication. And that's where you can kind of get lost in, like, the obscure side of, like, the art world, where it's just like, oh, well, it's, you know, my truth, or it's my version of this or whatever, and, you know, people want to argue with you about that. And I get that to some degree, but I think on a realer sense, if art can't be understood and it can't communicate, then it's not very effective, or it's not as effective as it could be, and that's always a shame. I love looking at the old, you know, classic illustrators like N.C. Wyeth, Norman Rockwell, Line Decker, and such. And they did a very good job communicating. You could argue and say, well, you know, they were making posters, or they were doing, you know, they weren't really making art. Well, yeah, they were making art. They were communicating. That message can be anything that you want it to be. Even if it was like, Hayden Sundblom. He was painting, he would paint these massive, massive paintings where the faces of the character had to be as big as, I think, about 5 inches. So if you know anything about painting, that means, the canvas is like maybe 3-4 feet tall or across, I forget which, but it's very, very big. And Hayden Sundblom painted the Santa Claus for a little company known as Coca-Cola. And so, he would paint these massive, beautiful paintings of Santa drinking Coke. And that was the message. Even if the message is, drink Coca-Cola, if you're communicating, then you've successfully done that, then you're, in my eyes, a very successful artist. And that's the same for, like, even if you're doing comic art, especially if you're doing comic art. There's so much to communicate. It's difficult sometimes to find ways to illustrate all the things that you want to tell your readers. Finding a way to get that information while still staying within the pages that you're given and the time frame that you have. And communicating an art style, that's a lot. But it's worth it. It's well worth it. I guarantee it. If you've never tried it, try it at least once. I might go ahead and just block this whole thing in. Yeah, I like that better. My usual version of inking is much more aggressive. I'm trying to curb that right now. As I slowly put down the brush and pick up the pen. I got that brush in college purely, and I won't even pretend that this wasn't the case, but I saw that the artist Kim Jung-gi, who is now passed, unfortunately, but he had that brush pen or something similar to it. And I saw, I forget his first name, but Kopensky, one of the other artists from the Super Annie art studio. He also had a I think it's what is it, Pentel? All the labels have rubbed off. But a brush pen like that, and I loved the way that their drawings looked, and I really thought that, if I got that pen, I'd be able to draw like them, or at least maybe understand why they see, because that was the thing, they would only use these pens. I know Carl Kopensky, he would sometimes use some pencil drawings and stuff like that. He did a lot of artwork for I think he did paintings for Magic the Gathering as well. But that was one of the things that I saw and I just kind of had to have in college. So I got it, and lo and behold, it's a difficult tool to use. But I won't lie, I still love it, and I still used it a lot when I was in college, and I use it a lot now. I think mostly it's just stubbornness that helped me when I was trying to figure out how to use it, because I'd spent so much money and waited so long to have it shipped in from Japan. I will say, though, like, it's not good for everything. Mostly because, like, I know this because I go overboard with it constantly. And no, I can't draw like Kim Jong-gi or Karl Kapinski or anybody from the Super Any. I think even their secretary can draw better than I, but you know, I still really enjoyed there was that period where they were making a lot of videos on YouTube, and I enjoy watching those. I enjoyed when they came out, and I enjoy watching them now. And it's unfortunate that Kim Jong-gi is no longer with us. I will say he was very talented. He was very good at what he did. But a lot of his stuff is very inappropriate, so browse with caution, I would say. But yeah. Alright. Let's take a step back from up here, I think. Well, let's get this maybe shirt done first. Don't love how that shirt looks right now. I'm gonna try to fill in lightly some of these areas, see if I can't bring back some of the form I'm looking for. I think even if I do get the forms back, this is going to be the weakest part of the drawing. Just because I did not do as much prep work and as much research on this part of the drawing as I should have. That's on me. Yeah, let's leave that alone for now and we'll come back to it. Let's work on this leg. I kind of bounce around a lot, whether I am doing the pencil work or doing the inking. It seems I can't be bothered to stay in just one spot. And that's good for, like, you know, I don't get bogged down in just one area or the other, but it's not so great when you forget to do things in one area because you got bored and went to go do something else. I won't have to say that happens a lot, but, you know, sometimes. Recently I've been working on DFD, trying to get the chapters done for that, which by now, if you're seeing this, hopefully that's either finished or close to finish. And, but one of the things I've noticed is I keep forgetting to draw certain parts of characters. And they're kind of important, and so it's a little annoying when I discover that I forget. Recently, I inked a page, or I was coloring a page. It made it all the way to the coloring stage. Thankfully, no further. All the way to the coloring stage, and I noticed that I had only given Ephedrine one ear. I was so furious with myself. How could you forget the other ear? not like it was a small thing either that I could cover up with hair. She has these very long ears. But apparently in my rush to get these panels done, I had forgotten it and was very upset with myself. Still am a little bit, but I may forgive myself eventually. Someday. Make sure these outline lines stand out. Go. You'll notice I turn my page a lot, and I've seen some people where they immediately when they go to draw, they tape their drawing to their desk, and I'm sure there's a good reason for that. I just have no idea why they would do that, because your wrist can only move naturally and comfortably in so many ways. So why would you restrict it with tape on your desk and not being able to move your drawing? I don't understand that. Mm-hmm. There we go. Oh, I should do the shading on the top here before I get too excited. Essentially, this stage, I'm just visiting certain areas, and if I like how I've drawn them and how I've gone across it with the ink after the line work is done. And by line work, I just mean like the simple stuff, no shading, nothing like that. But if I'm happy by the end of that, what I'll do is I'll just kind of go back over it and get the fills in finished with my brush. And then just move on to another area. Do the same thing. Sometimes what they'll do, what I've seen other people do, is go over the whole drawing with a with their pen and do the line work, and then come over and do all of the shading and then do all of the fills. I've tried that method. I won't say it's bad, and indeed I could probably stand to do that more, but I find that having bits and pieces of the drawing finished is nice. I think it's mostly impatience. This is the reason. That's the translation of my previous statement. really like working with fantasy characters. And I wouldn't say I'm very much a fantasy fan. It took me until I was in college to watch Lord of the Rings. Because I feel like I knew too many fantasy fandoms. Not fans, fandoms, where, you know, they're absolutely obsessed with the stuff and they know Elvish and whatnot. And I've never been a big fan of fandom in the sense of only experiencing or only reserving your utmost excitement for just that one thing. And I've never understood why you would do that. Why only say like you know, like Full Metal Alchemist. I love Full Metal Alchemist. I think it's an amazing world. I think Arakawa did a great job with, you know, illustrating and understanding a lot of aspects of storytelling to bring that to us. But I know so many people where it's like that's the only thing they'll talk about. That's the only thing that, you know, they'll just latch onto that forever. And I can't say I can really agree with that. I think for me, I'm not someone who is, you know, into disposable entertainment either. I won't say, you know, watch it and then, you know, never watch it again or get rid of it. I think for me, my thing is, you know, appreciate the artist for what they've done, and if you really, really like what they did, then either look up and see what else they have done, or what their inspirations are, or what else has been done. And I talked a little bit about this in my fan art video, where I ticked off a lot of people by saying I hate fan art. But, which, by the way, if you haven't seen that video, I don't hate fan art. Part of that was clickbait, the other part of that was like, I hate fan art under certain conditions. But one of the things that I think, as an artist, you have to learn how to grow and continue, and not let yourself get stuck by just one experience or one thing. So for me, like, I love the movie Blade Runner, but I also like, you know, Dune. I also like Collateral. I also like I was watching Bullet Train recently. I like that movie, and all on different levels. I don't think any of those are, except Blade Runner is probably my favorite. But I'm not going to stop everything I'm doing just to appreciate Blade Runner exclusively all the time. Although if you talk to me in real life, it's probably something that will happen. More than likely if we're talking sci-fi. But yeah, I never really got into the whole fandom thing. I think it's just like I'm not a huge fan of obsession, let's put it that way. In obsession over things that aren't as important. Now I say that, and I think a lot of what I do is obsessive. And I'm obsessed over different things. I'm obsessed with improving myself and improving how I draw and how I work. Finding ways to tell stories that I want to tell. Enjoying life in a meaningful way with people that I like. Stuff like that. And I won't pretend like I'm like that 300% of the time. I definitely slack off and take time. Like, obviously, like, I read a ton of comic books. I enjoy watching movies. I do enjoy things outside of just art, but a large bit of my time is devoted to art and to getting better. So I wouldn't say it annoys me, but it concerns me sometimes when I see people and they don't seem to have any ambition, but they want things, you know? And I'm not saying just because, you know, you're in a fandom doesn't mean you can improve or get very good at as an artist. Obviously that's not the case. But I don't think it's healthy to get stuck. Let's put it that way. I think it's much better to enjoy and sample things in life. Like the sample platter at Sam's. And then take those ingredients and make something beautiful and interesting for yourself out of all of your experiences, and then that'll be something unique. And that's how you find your own style. That's how you find your own creative voice. So there's me narrowly dodging a lot of arrows from the fandoms. Probably not completely, because I'm sure I'll still get some fun notes later. Although I have to say, the community surrounding this channel has been very nice and very gracious to me. So I appreciate that, and I'll try not to abuse that kindness. Heavens knows I don't deserve it. So this character, Whim, it's an interesting character. I've never really known too much about the Eladrin, this fairy race in D&D. Sorry, fairy elves. There's a whole thing about the Fae realm. And I might have to study more about them, because they were kind of interesting from the light bit of Googling I did on them. But as I understand, there's like almost like some sub-races, as I understand it, or some maybe phases that they go through, where you've got the different seasons represented. You've got a winter Eladrin, a summer Eladrin, fall, and whatnot. Don't quite know what that does outside of, like, I think there's like some mechanical differences. As far as, like, I think one of them is, I forget if it is like with your ability scores or maybe spells or something, I don't know. Which now with D&D 2025, it's completely different, which I've been following that controversy loosely, and I wasn't really that invested till I heard they got rid of, like, half races. And I thought that was the dumbest thing ever, because they did it supposedly, and I'm gonna try to say this civilly so this doesn't turn into a whole rant and I ruin my inking, but they got rid of half races supposedly so that because the idea of half races was racist. And I'm like, okay, isn't it racist to say that all fantasy races have to stay within their race? You know, they can't, have relationships outside of their race. You can't have like elves and orcs getting married and having kids. You can't have interspecies. It can only be interspecies relationships or something like that, or however you would say that. And that just threw me for a loop and really got me upset, because I was like, that's such a interesting storytelling thing beyond just, you know, the politics of it. Because it's like, you know, you walk across this field and you meet this man who seems to be half this and half that. Maybe he's half centaur and half mermaid, or whatever their mermaid race was called. I think it's Triton. No, Triton's different. But, you know, maybe it is a half Triton, half centaur. But he just has two normal human halves. You know, even that is like, it's a fun use for storytelling. It's interesting. And I think it's an utter shame that they've gotten rid of that. And I think it's truly a sign of where their interests lie right now as a company, outside of, you know, what the players want and what people that actually play the game, you know, are thinking about. Because I don't think anybody was thinking, oh man, I don't know if I can play this, you know, a game with these half-elves. People that are from two different types of parents just freak me out. That's just wrong. And that's me, it's my very, very calm and doing my best to not freak out rant about that. I think right now Wizards of the Coast are kind of on thin ice on a lot of things, and I don't know if that's still one of them. I know D&D 2025 is probably not, you know, getting a lot of positive things said about it, and that's unfortunate for them. But I think what they could do to improve that is to kind of evaluate, well, what's the player base actually, you know, concerned about? You know, figure that out. Like combat, I will say, as a 5e player, there's something about combat that's not quite as fulfilling as it should be. I feel like there's a way to figure that out in 5e, or in a new edition, you know. But you know, I digress. And warlocks, oh my goodness, if I can park on that topic for a little bit. Like, I love playing warlocks, I think it's great, but then when you've got to sit down and basically be like, well, you've got power from an eldritch deity, but you don't know who it is, and you don't declare it until level 3. Level 3 is a long way off if you're just starting. And, you know, I understand, you know, they were trying to do it to kind of level the playing field on a lot of different things. But, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I think clerics are worse off. I don't remember. I didn't read about them as much. But I remember I was reading, like, an article on warlocks and how they were... Yeah, they just worship something or serve some sort of deity or eldritch being that they just don't know, and then later they can determine it. I'm like, how's that supposed to work if for roleplay or for character flavor or anything like that? I don't think that's... I don't think that's very sound at all. And I don't want to say, like, I blame them for making that choice. Because, like, from one stance, I can definitely see how it makes sense. I don't think it's, like, 100% a bad thing. Oh my goodness, we should burn wizards of the coast to the ground. Just because of that. But I will say what's more disheartening is just how lazily it was just kind of dismissed. Like, there's nothing in the book to tell you, okay, how you should work with this or how you should handle these things if you're a DM or if you're a player. And that to me is really concerning when they're just like, figure it out, these are the rules now. It shows a lack of, I don't know, initiative, care. I don't think there's... And I'm not saying, like, I know the writers put a lot of themselves into the book, and I appreciate that, but what I can't quite forgive or quite understand is why you would make such drastic changes in certain areas and just not explain why. Or not give, like, a way to try to kind of help your fan base, you know, operate in this, you know, new space. So, like, you know, that'd be like if your boss showed up one day and told you, like, you know, you have to, if you want to work here, you have to do this system. He doesn't really tell you why, and you don't really understand it. And he doesn't really give you any options to train in it or to talk to anybody who's done it before or anything like that. It's a bad analogy, but I think it's unfortunate that that's the case. I really, really wish that they had some sort of, I don't know, a better approach to the fan base, let's say. Oh, and that was the other thing. I remember that. I was reading when it was still called 1D&D. They're like, oh, we're gonna have this new system for half races where you can mix and match stuff, and you can have this different point system and all that. And it's like, that's smart, because you can take different aspects of two races and combine them into a completely different race. And it was such a neat idea, because that just opened up a whole new avenue for a bunch of different character creation options. And then they were just like, no. And part of me wonders, like, I know a lot of people want to get political about it, and they want to, you know, point out something, and I'm not going to disagree or agree either way on that, but what I couldn't help but think was, what if they just got to, like, you know, their deadline, and essentially they looked at it and they said, we have to cut something, and we've already hyped up this race thing, like this half race thing, a lot, so why don't we just, like, cut this out completely, because it's too hard to finish it, and then we'll just release the books and say, yes, half races are somehow wrong. That's what it felt like to me. And I don't know. Again, cool thing about TTRPGs, though, is you can completely ignore whoever puts them out and either make your own stuff or go with something that was previously released. Because what are they going to do? Come and take your books? Tell you, oh no, you can't play 3E, you can't, you know, do Pathfinder anymore, that's out of date. Yeah, it is. We're still playing checkers, we're still playing old Monopoly. I think at the beginning of this I said I was going to keep my hatching to like a minimum, or like at least try to control it. I think that's gone out the window. Just looking at the drawing now, I think I've officially just gone off the deep end. That's okay. Alright, I like how that boot turned out. Now let's go and let's tighten up some of this. Okay. Let's go ahead and get this barrel out of the way, why don't we? Or part of it at least. The thing about having props in your drawing is it's easy to either go nuts with the props or to, you know, completely forget the props and let them just sit off to the sidelines and kind of get ignored. I think there's a balance that should be had, but I know for certain when it comes to either props or characters, always pick characters. Unless somehow you've got a prop as your main character, it's important that the characters are the main part of your story and the composition. Now, this isn't always true, of course, in comics, because in comics you have to, you know, show things that are happening maybe off frame or something that's happening in a different space or something like that. But in general, characters are the most important thing. That's why it's important to study anatomy, that's why it's important to study expression and all the ways that you can gesture sketching and all the ways that you can show your characters and make them come alive. But in this case, this prop here is kind of important. I think it kind of gives a little bit of the humor in the composition. because I think normally if this was just a normal barrel and it didn't say Alchemist Fire right on it, this could be like almost a pin-up. Not quite, because she's got all of her clothes on, but I feel like when it comes to female poses, the balance is you want to show the feminine side of the character without necessarily exploiting that. You know, unless that's the character. Like if I was drawing like Rouge the Bat, well obviously she's like a femme fatale, that's like her whole thing. She's like a femme fatale and a gem thief. So yeah, you would draw her in a certain way, maybe different than you would draw Wonder Woman. But that's the thing, you have to understand your character and understand maybe their motivations before you put them in a pose. But still keep them female, obviously. I think it's unfortunate nowadays where we have so many characters that are getting like these female versions, these female counterparts of them. And some of them aren't all bad, but like I think it's unfortunate that like you essentially try to you know, show it's like, ah yes, you know, we've got Thor now, but Thor's a woman. But you haven't really remade Thor as a character. And I'm thinking more like I think in the movies more than in the comics. I think they did better in the comics. I honestly don't know because I don't really read Thor. But I remember like seeing that, and they were like redoing a lot of the iconic Thor covers with Jane Foster's Thor. And something that like kind of struck me was like, if you were just gonna do Thor again, why make him a woman? Because that was the thing, like if the character's exactly the same, just reskinned, you know, why would you do that? Why not make like your own interest? If you want to show that women are interesting and powerful and they are, and you know, strong, capable and whatnot like that, then make your own interesting characters. Don't piggyback off of, you know, there's no need to make a female Captain America or a female Wolverine or a, you know, fill in the blank character, but gender swapped, race swapped, or whatever. That's why so many people hated Riri Williams as Iron Man. Because she wasn't Iron Man, for sure. But then she also just was a super annoying character because she just showed up and she was just super smart and great and everything and all that. And I'm just like, you know, where did she come from? What was her idea? You know, what was her purpose before this? Who is she? And I remember reading that first Iron Man thing, and they're like, no, this is pretty much the first time she's ever showed up. And I was like, well, I can see why people are mad. It's like there's no way. Because they didn't do that with like, with Spider-Man. They had Miles Morales. He was a well-established character before they brought him in, and he was, you know, Spider-Man, while Peter Parker was, I think in the Ultimate Universe he was dead. And I think that's, you know, there was enough story there before Peter Parker died. I don't know for certain because I didn't read that, but from what I understand, Miles Morales was much more accepted because he wasn't just somebody that they, you know, oh, this is Miles Morales, he's a black 13-year-old, so he's the new Spider-Man now, have fun, play nice. It's kind of like, you know, it's like when your parents bring in a new kid, and just because they're new and about the same age as you, you're supposed to get along. It's like, no, that's what? It's like, he's into dinosaurs and I'm into trucks. Why would we ever get along? That's the way that like it was at Marvel Comics for a really long time. With the Marvel Now thing that just utterly bombed. They just kept having these reinterpretations of characters that they already had, and they kept trying to sell them to you like they were the original characters, but they weren't. They're like, again, why can't we just have the original Iron Man? Why can't we just have the original Wolverine? Why can't we just have all, the original characters back? Oh, well, when I have diversity, inclusivity, and all that, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think what's bad is when you're not being creative, and that was definitely like some of the laziest things I think they could have done. That's why so many of those comic characters, it's sad to say, but like, when those some of those lines have been redone over and over again. I know like Kamala Khan, like she's had like I don't know how many issue ones. I don't know how many like almost reboots of her character really, just to make her interesting. And some people like her, but I think the majority is it's not as popular of a character. Same with like I know Admas Cho, Hulk. Not a lot of people were happy with that, and I'm sure they've tried to get that character to work again and again, and it hasn't. And again, it's not because they're Korean, it's not because they're, anything necessarily, other than they're not the, original character. They're not the one that people know and love. And they're not an original character either. But to go to the other side of things, it is difficult to make new things in American comics. Because the way that the story always has to go is you have superhero A has to fight villain A, B, and C. And, you have to have your origin story, which has to stay exactly the same as it was when it was written in the 60s. And you have to have, the girlfriend, but it has to be the right girlfriend, or it has to be, maybe changed or dated up for the times or something. And then you've got to have, all the same story beats, so you can't be too creative, but it's got to be new and fresh still. So it's a tough job working with those characters and trying to get them interesting and get them right every time. So I won't completely bash them, all over the head. Probably as much as before when I was writing comics and trying to do my own stuff. But I will say, on the other side of things, being completely fair, they could have done a lot better. Makes me wonder, drawing this, why, and maybe this exists and I just don't know about it, maybe I'm ignorant, but I don't know why they haven't tried to make a official Dungeons and Dragons comic. I mean, I say how hard would that be, but, you know, I'm sure it's quite difficult, but I know a lot of great series and comics and games have come out of Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know why they wouldn't. I know they've got novels, and I know there's like a whole lore there to the Sword Coast and Baldur's Gate and whatnot that I don't know very well, but I wonder if they couldn't find a way to tell those stories, or maybe even tell new stories in a comic format. Or even just like if they did like an anthology series, that'd be kind of cool. I know Critical Role's got a comic series. I'll say that's the ones that I've read, I'll say, have been pretty alright. Some of them I think how do I put this nicely? There's one or two I'm thinking of in particular where I think the art is a bit of a problem, in the sense that it's not really, and again, I feel mean for saying that, just because, like, you know, I understand, I've done comics, I've done fantasy comics before, and I understand these people have way more experience than I do, and it's not, maybe not right for me to critique them, but I don't love the style on some of those comics. I think there's something that's not as refined, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal if that was just like its way across, but because they have all these, you know, guest artists, it's kind of difficult to not look at it and be like, well, this wasn't as good as this, you know, artist, or this issue wasn't as good as that issue. But again, it's difficult to do anything in comics, especially when you've got to adapt those kind of characters. I know Critical Role's got crazy amount of lore, but then also just like everything about their characters is, you know, completely unhinged in some cases, but then also like very intricate. Right. Should probably say something nice. I think the storytelling so far that I've seen from Critical Role is pretty well done. And I say that having watched all of like Campaign 2. But I think like overall they've done a pretty good job in their world and in making, you know, the way that they play D&D accessible for everybody and entertaining, but more than just entertainment for entertainment's sake. It's nice to see people just have fun with, you know, the story and work together to make something collaborative and interesting. And I'm not saying they're like perfect. I don't think anybody is. I think there's some definite flaws. But I think it's nice to see a hub of creativity like that. I think in general, TTRPGs are really good for creativity because they really challenge you to think. Not just in-game, but even before you sit down to the table. You kind of have to create your own story and not, you know, be ready for that to change. It's the same way in art, you know, when you sit down, you're going to make a comic, or you sit down, you're going to make an illustration. You've got a picture in your head, and you're hoping that it works that way, but sometimes it doesn't. And a lot of times, that's okay. A lot of times you can make something better than you imagined, or you just have to adapt, or you have to, you know, find a new way to get to where you were going before, or find something new to make your goal. And for me, like, I think it's very cool that that's a collaborative space for people, especially creative people, to you know, congregate around, because there's so many great opportunities for storytelling, for character creation, for like art, for design work and craftsmanship. It's very, very cool community. It's not for everybody, but it's quite interesting. Quite fun. And that's you know, that's why I like working on characters like this, because usually by the time you get them for official character art, or even just fan art, like, you know, there's already a whole story there. Like, Whim is like this, you know, mischievous Eladrin who, you know, she's got all this stuff in her bags, and who knows what she'll pull out, and it's crazy, and it's fun, and it's neat, because now I get to come in and I get to collaborate essentially with this, you know, creation that's already been made, and put my own unique spin on it, and how I'm drawing her, and how I'm contributing to the original artist's vision. It's very, very fun. It's very exciting to be a part of that. Let's see if we can't finish this leg before we're out of time for the day. I get stuck into inking so much that I forget that I'm supposed to maybe talk every now and then. One of the things that was interesting to work with this drawing is the way the character is sitting is both on the barrel and in the barrel. In the sense that the top of the barrel isn't perfectly flat. So she's not completely on top of the barrel. So part of her is kind of sitting in the top of the barrel here. You can kind of see this edge back here. But she's on top of it. Mostly. So I kind of had to look up some reference with legs and hips and how they deform and how much they can deform around other objects. And it was kind of interesting for me. It was a neat anatomy study to see how much you don't realize your legs kind of cushion your body while you're sitting. Which is, why they say sitting's bad for you. But I will say, like, just looking at that and realizing, not just the clothes, but the legs and the body itself deforming when it comes in contact with another shape is kind of interesting. And I think it adds a bit of detail to this drawing that is important and hopefully makes it more realistic and more interesting. And that's something that you can do while you're working on your drawings, even if you're doing something fantastical or something that's, not real. If you inject just a tiny bit of reality into it, sometimes you can make that thing pop even more and make your illustration much more visually appealing, and then also rooted in a sense of realism. I know, like, even Salvador Dali and Picasso, who were, artists that dealt in the surreal, still were working in they were still classically trained. They still thought about, light and shadow and form and such like that. And so that's why, when I would work with my students, they're like, I'm only interested in drawing manga, and they're like, well, manga artists are constantly talking about these classic artists, and those classic artists are constantly talking about, the forms of things and the classical ideals of, measurements and proportions and stuff like that. So it's like, maybe you should also do that. And I would surprise some of them with that. Because usually I think what they were trying to get me to say is, well, maybe challenge whether or not, cartoons or manga or whatever was actual art. And that was never a question for me, because obviously, like, I grew up watching cartoons. I read and watched anime and manga in my later years, so I was like, yeah, it is an art. It's an art form. We're not discussing that. What we're discussing is what you need to make that, and what other people have used to make the things that you enjoy. You should always try to find out the artists in your life, what they, what were the artists in their life, what was the inspirations that they, drew from, sometimes literally. Clean this off. Alright. Well, you'll remember this leg was a pain in the butt when I was doing it in the penciling stage, and I would say it's carried over into the inking stage. Same attitude of being a pain. For no good reason, I might add. I've given it every opportunity to be easy and fun. It's like, no, not happening. So once again, I don't know how much you can hear the birds outside, but they are happy today. They're very, very jubilant. I think this is especially so because I walked outside and there's a nest right underneath a overhang from where my room is, so there's definitely some bird traffic going on down there. But you know, I'm recording this in spring, and that's just one of the things that happens in spring. You get birds and they have nests and they're happy, they have little chicks and, you know, all kinds of stuff. And you know, the air is just too nice and fresh to leave the windows shut, so I figured some free ambience, and if I go back through and listen to it and it's too loud, I guess I'll close it in the future, but I'll enjoy it for now. Alright, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to finish up these folds here, and then we're going to maybe skip on over to the next day or to the next time. I might be later today, actually, depending on how my schedule works out. Alright. Alright, well, I've done a couple of things now that I think should help me finish up this inking. One, I cleaned all my pen nibs, so now you can probably notice they're a lot smoother than they were before. And 2, I took a lovely little nap. Only about 10 minutes, but let me tell you, I needed it. And to be real though, like, honestly about 10 minutes is all you need. When I was in college, one of the things that I would do often is I had this work shift, and it ended oddly 30 minutes before my next class, and I was okay with that, except for like there's really nothing I could do during that 30 minutes because it wasn't close enough to lunch, and it was like, you know, everything else was too far away to justify walking across campus just to turn around and walk back. So what I would do is, usually I was pretty tired at that time of the day, and it was too far to get back to my dorm. So I would sit at my desk, and if I was really tired, I would take my jacket, because I always had a jacket at my desk, roll it up, and I would sleep underneath my desk that I had in the kind of lab space that we had there. Because the mentality there is like, if I'm actually tired, if I'm really tired, I'll fall asleep on the ground. You know, and I'll be able to take a nap for 30 minutes. If I'm not really tired, if I don't fall asleep in that, then, you know, it's time to, I need to do some work or something. And I want to say 8 times out of 10, maybe a little more, I would fall asleep. And then the bell would ring, and I would wake up, and I'd be all refreshed and ready to go to class. And that's the thing, you know, you don't need, like, the thing with naps is, if you're, I think, like, 30 minutes is almost too long for a nap. I think 30 minutes is like that's the longest nap you should take. Past that, you're just sleeping. Because at that point, you know, your brain is fully settled, your body is, like, now in that, it's just situated in that position that you're in, and it's not moving. So yeah, I think 10, maybe 15 minutes for me nowadays is pretty good. So what I'll do is, usually, if I'm really not feeling it and I know I've got to do something and there's no way I can reschedule it, it's worth it to me to pause what I'm doing just for 10 minutes. And go, you know, set an alarm, set it on my phone, and then set the phone far away so I don't, you know, just sit there in bed on my phone. And then just close my eyes with a blanket for, like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. I think 5 minutes is too short. So, like, I think the sweet spot is around 15 minutes. Depending on how exhausted you are. But that'll just give you a nice little boost, while also giving you a little bit of a rest. And I won't pretend like I jump out of bed right at the stroke of 10 minutes. Usually takes me like a minute or two to fully get the sleep out of my eyes, but still. Just take those 10 minutes and then get back into work. It's a good way of promoting productivity, especially like when I'm doing, you know, 14, 15-hour days like this. You'll notice I put a little bit of white gouache over this area here. I think there was too much ink. And I didn't want to have it all messy, but I forgot to turn on the camera for it, so there's a bit of off-camera work that's happened. You'll have to forgive me. I know, how could I dare work on a drawing without a camera on? That's just, it's not done. There are times where I think it's like when I'm drawing on camera, I draw a lot better, and part of that's probably nervous energy. At this point, I don't know, because I don't fully notice it or register it, because I'm used to just like ignoring the camera and just getting to work. But I think so many more times there's been where I'll sit down to draw and I'll get like tense and be ready to like kind of prepare for like that nervous energy to hit, where it's just like, okay, you got to get this drawing right, and then I realize it's like, oh wait, I'm just like drawing for fun, or I'm not drawing on camera right now. And I won't say like drawing on camera like gets me stressed, but I would be lying if I didn't say like there wasn't an extra level of awareness when I'm drawing on camera versus when I'm not drawing on camera. I think anyone that tells you that they don't get nervous on camera is, I don't know, probably lying. We all get a little nervous, but you know, eventually you get used to it, and or you don't, and you just not record yourself while you're drawing, just have fun when you're drawing instead of trying to make it a thing. I truly wish there was an alternative to well, there is. Let me rephrase that. You don't have to, and I will never promote, you know, exclusively being on social media to promote yourself as an artist. I don't think that it's necessary. I think in this day and age it's definitely helpful, and I think in this this medium allows you to explore a lot of things that maybe you didn't expect to, and connect with a much wider community if you know, really take your time and build that community. But I'm never going to pretend like YouTube is the only way that you can reach people, or Instagram or social media at all. I think you know, some of the best, or I know some of the best connections that I have are with people that I've met in face to face in real life. And you could say what you want about that. You can say, you know, oh, you know, it's easy for you to say you don't have social anxiety, or you know, probably are used to talking to people. But you know, I grew up, I was a shy kid. I didn't talk to anybody. I know it's hard to believe now, but I did not grow up around a lot of people. And then when I did, you know, go out into public or meet new people, I did not really talk to people that much until I was in college, really. It's kind of an embarrassingly long time to be shy of people, but you know, I think what changed is when I was in college, I realized it's like, okay, you need to move on, and you need to be a person that can talk to people, because no one here is going to talk to anybody for you. And so being on my own really did help me get past some of those fears. And I think sometimes in like survival situations, the best of people can come out. The worst can also come out. That's why like so many people in customer service are yelled at all the time, because they're dealing with the worst of people because they're stressed. But if you're in a scenario where you're in the deep end of the pool, I think a lot of times that will make you better, and that will help you if you kind of push the boundaries and put yourself in a scenario that, you know, isn't maybe targeted towards something that you're uncomfortable with, but maybe more just slightly out of your comfort zone. And then eventually that just becomes commonplace. And I've said it before, it's like, you know, if you're scared of something, repetition's the way to get rid of that fear. If you were afraid of jumping out of an airplane, if you jumped out of an airplane every day for a week, eventually it would become commonplace. Because I think that Joker said it in the Batman. It's like nobody freaks out when it's all part of the plan, and that's true. It's part of the human psyche. Is you can get used to anything, even horrific things, or even terrifying things, until eventually it's no longer. It becomes commonplace for you. Okay, let's do the hair. Hold your breath, boys and girls. We're doing the hair. For real, this hair has been like... Every time I walk past this drawing, because it's very prominently on my desk, and I can see it just about anywhere in the room. So every time I come into this room, I see the hair, and I'm just like, ugh. I get a little bit more... I just, like, not like nervous, but like more like I keep thinking about it, and I keep thinking about like how I want it to look, and what I need to do that, and pull up other artists and look at, how they draw hair and whatnot. Try to help me not psych myself out about it, but sure, it's happening anyway. So you really want to make the hair darker, pretty much like this spot of dark that I'm adding here, anytime the hair curves. I think this is a bad example, actually. I might white that out, but like right here, you can kind of see where I've got hair curving down and trying to get it to flow nicely. And if it's lighter hair, you want to definitely go lighter on the dark spots. This is like purple hair, so I figure it would like act similarly to dark black hair, but when I go to paint it, I will probably make all of the highlights this rich purple. Okay. Let's do some of the fills on that. Well, no, let's not. Let's wait. Let's do this first. Every time I start working on a project, after pausing, I always have this dread that's like, alright, cool, now I'm gonna mess it up. And it's so rarely the case where I will, if I've taken a break and I've taken my time, or if I've taken a nap or a walk or something like that, when I come back, I'm rarely just as destructive as I think I'm going to be. But there's been times where a lot of projects, you know, I've obviously worked on a project too long, and I thought I wanted to use a brush there. I don't. I want to use this brush, normal brush pen. I've let a project sit, and I'll let it sit too long because I'll be scared to pick it back up or to try to complete it. And then, you know, of course it'll sit there longer and longer, and I'll get even more frustrated with it since it's not finished, and I'm afraid of, you know, messing it up. So it's like, okay, eventually something's got to give. So I think when it comes to, like, being afraid you're going to mess something up, it's like, just know there's always an ugly stage to every single project you'll ever do. And that's okay. One of the things I learned about painting was you have to kind of gauge where and when that ugly stage is going to happen, so that you can write it out. Because if you just get stuck, you know, expecting the paint to kind of fix everything for you, you know, you're never gonna get a good painting. You just have to, like, realize it's like with each medium, each painting medium, or each medium in general, whatever artwork you're doing, there is a waiting time, and that's the ugly stage waiting time. So for me, like, when I was doing gouache painting, the gouache ugly stage lasts almost all the way up to, like, the last hour of the painting. And it's so frustrating to work with that. I think oil, for me, it's like a little bit faster, just because, like, oil has, like, a neat kind of blending. There's neat blending techniques that you can use. I shouldn't be doing that. I should lighten this out. Oh, but I kind of like it, but I don't want it to be too busy. There's a war going on inside me because I both want to crosshatch and not crosshatch this drawing. Yeah, with painting, it's sometimes difficult to envision what your painting will be during those ugly stages, or, like, same with sculpting. There's of course the ugly stage where you've just got the lob of clay. And if you just quit at that stage right there, you know, you'll never see what you can make. I think too many people expect it to be like on Instagram when, you know, you watch somebody do something in time lapse and it all comes together very, very quickly and very smoothly. Or they've practiced the drawing 3 or 4 times, so by the time they draw it on camera, it's like perfect. That's not how it is in real life. Especially if you're just getting started, you know, give yourself a little bit of leeway. And I talk a good game about that, but I know I'm one of the worst at that. It's like, oh man. I'm starting something new. Why am I not instantly better at it? Or why am I not instantly, you know, really good and adept at this? So patience is a skill that I struggle with. For sure. So you're not alone in that if you're like me. Adding some freckles here. I think freckles are like a good way to kind of give your characters almost like a childlike look. Without aging them down too much. I think it's a good way to kind of hint at maybe a character that's a little less mature. Okay. Let's do some of these lines up here since I've still got ink on the nib. Or do I? Oh, no I don't. Alright then. Swap back over. I've heard inking with the left hand is a nightmare. I wouldn't know, I'm not ambidextrous or left-handed. I wish I was. Ambidextrous, that is. No, I've heard also that like if you are left-handed, since you're used to basically smudging everything you've ever written before, you're used to like avoiding that. So people that are left-handed often ink better than people that are right-handed, even if it's more difficult for them. Which makes sense. I mean, if you play life on hard mode, that's kind of how that works. Not that you have a choice if you're left-handed. Although, I mean, if that's part of the custom characterization screen that I missed, maybe. Just in the womb, you're in there. It's like right or left-handed. Like, I can't read. That's where babies come from, kids. But that's how people look different. Well, this is nice. We're flying through this, aren't we? It feels like we're flying through this. I just uploaded the last 2 sessions onto the my editing software of choice. And I noted that this will be another really long video at about probably 4 or 5 hours by the time I finish it. But what I think I'll do is I'll break up the drawing section and the coloring section into 2 different videos. Of course, and if I do that, I'll have somebody who's just like, well, it's not the full process on this video. It'd be, you know, I'd watch a 6-hour-long video, and you know, that's awesome. I'm glad that there's people that would do that, but I don't know that I want to render a 6-hour-long video. Alright, what am I missing? Let's take a look. It's in a book. Reading Rainbow. I get that stuck in my head all the time. And today's been like especially a singy day. I don't know why, but like I woke up and I just started singing anything and everything that came into my head. Speaking of singing, my music stopped. How dare. I cannot perform without the bards of the internet entertaining me and entertaining my ears. There we go. Some lo-fi grunge covers. It's always fun when I go to edit these because I'll put on music that's sometimes pretty close to what I was listening to while I was working. And then other times it's like everything I'm listening to is far too copywritten or too moody, I think. Because I want these videos to be relaxing and informative. But sometimes I'm listening to like grunge or different types of rock and stuff like that. Alright, let's go ahead and get these lines on the barrel finished. This pen nib, I don't remember what it's called. It might be a school nib or something like that, but it's used specifically for like drawing buildings in straight lines and such generally. And I like it because I can usually go in and it's good for like when I want to draw these larger areas of just like non-organic lines, but then it's also great for shading. But so's brushes, like this one. That's real worthy, I like that. That was nice and smooth. Now watch me mess it up. Only problem with this brush is it does not hold that much. So you get one nice line like that and then you're pretty much done. See, it's already out. Just kind of lightly going over this area. quick back and forth strokes with the almost dry brush. It's not fully dry yet, but there we go. You start to see where it's... This is where I want the transition from the light to the dark to be. And I want it to very, very much be different from the leg here. But here's what I'm planning to do, in case I go quiet and forget to explain. I'm gonna try to get this barrel in as good a spot as I can. But in reality what I'm doing is I'm stalling for time, so all of this will dry and I'll go over it with an eraser, and then I'll see if there's anything I need to touch up, and then we should be good. I don't think you have to have skills with a brush in order to be a good inker. I know for me, I get a different effect than what I do with any other tool when I use a brush. And that's something that I think is really the question you should be asking is like, should I try the brush to see if it applies, you know, to my inking scenario or to my comic or whatever? Is it, you know, worth, you know, getting in that practice? I don't think there's anything wrong with experimenting, and I highly encourage it, in fact, because, you know, just, you can buy any brush, really, buy the cheapest thing that you can find at Walmart, or you can buy a rather expensive brush, although I would caution against buying anything super expensive for ink, just because the ink does just eat the brush. There's no real way to get around that. Eventually the ink will just gum up the brush completely, although if you take good care of your brushes and wash them frequently, that'll happen a lot slower. But I think even so, every artist I've ever seen use brushes for ink has said the same thing, which is, you know, eventually you just have to replace your brush after a couple months or so. Especially if you're doing, like, you know, a lot of inking. Especially if you're doing something like this size all the time. Which I can attest to that. I probably replace them slower just because, again, like, I live 45, almost an hour away from a craft store or craft shop, or even a place that sells brushes. I guess Walmart technically does, and that's not too far away, but I like buying larger packs of better brushes. Not like super high end, but better, because they last a tad bit longer. Yeah, if you want to get into inking with a brush, definitely give it a shot. It's very, I don't know, to me it's freeing. I know a lot of people get freaked out by it, but to me it's almost freeing, because now it's like, okay, it's not really in my wheelhouse whether or not this turns out right or not. It's kind of into the brush, and it's like, I know I'm not going to get perfect lines, and that's okay. I don't know how often I do this on camera or not, but something I've realized I started doing is I really get into music sometimes. So I'll be like humming along with the beat if I'm listening to music, I'll be bobbing my head or dancing or whatever. And it's like, you know, I think everybody does that a little bit, but like I used to do that at work all the time. People would be like, stop it, the manager's gonna see. And I'm like, and what are they gonna do? Tell me not to like a song, you know, feel the rhythm, feel the rhyme. And you know, it was embarrassing for some people, and I guess it just wasn't something they were used to. And You know, that's one of the nice things about working from home, not working in an office setting. And yeah, I didn't realize how much I liked music until I went to college, and I started noting. In case you couldn't tell, college was a lot for me. There was a lot that happened. But I knew I listened to a lot of music in general. I just didn't realize how much until like I had these Bluetooth headphones that I'd have to recharge. And I know they're like, these have 30 hour of battery life. And I have to recharge them like almost once every day. Which means I'm listening to music a lot. And then I also noticed like I was really big into audiobooks. So I still am. I love listening to audiobooks. If I could get away with talking and listening to an audiobook, I would, but I don't think I can do that. I can barely draw and talk. But, yeah, I think when I was listening to audiobooks, a lot of the times I would... Audible used to have this thing where you could return the book and then get free credit to get another book and whatever. And if you did that when they offered like free promos and stuff like that, you could get like basically infinite books, which is how my account got suspended for a little while because I pulled the trick for too long that eventually they realized that I had like so many books. But I used to have like a tally of how many books that I had been reading, and it was somewhere in 1 year or in like the 50s or something like that. And I would really listen to books all the time. Or I think I was shooting for 50 1 year. I think at that point I had like in the 30s. I don't know if I ever made it because again my account got suspended, and because of that, some of my library was deleted from like some of the books that I had renewed, and because sometimes they used to let you keep the book even after you returned it, I think, or it did with my account. There was some sort of deal. But yeah, I definitely abused it. So there's, I don't hold that against them. All right. Let's do the lettering. I'm not doing that with the brush, I can tell you that right now. Although, it might go faster. For those of you wondering, I know I said this at the beginning of the video, but I might have forgot to point it out. How I clean my brush is I actually use this pen cleaner from Speedball. And all it is pretty much the same stuff that you clean jewelry with. So you pour this out into a small container. So I've got like this little D-wall box. You can see this is used because it's got all the nasty, here, let me show you, all the nasty ink water in it left over from the nibs. You just drop that in there. I like to prop it up so it doesn't have to fill it up all the way. And you leave it in there for about 30 minutes, I'd say. And you come back and you take it all out, and then you wipe it all down with a cloth to make sure to get rid of any of the residue that's still stuck on there, and then you're ready to go. You can put it back on your nib holder, and then just chuck the old pen cleaner and move on. And this bottle's about empty, but I've had it for quite some time, and I've used it, I want to say, for about 3-4 years. So I'm quite happy with that product. But you can buy just like normal jewelry cleaner. It's the same product. Or at least that's what I've heard. I've actually never tried that because I don't have jewelry. So I don't have jewelry cleaner either. Alright. So I traced these originally from the scan because I knew how bad my penmanship was, and I didn't want to give it a shot. But now I've got to go in and I've got to actually get these letters legible, or legible enough. I guess worst comes to worst, I could go in and type it in digitally when I do the coloring, but I still want this physical piece to look good. Let's just do the outline and then I'll do the fills later. I took a calligraphy class. It was a required course for graphic design of all things. I could never figure out how those two correlated. I still don't. One moment. So I never did understand why they wanted you to take a calligraphy course in order to complete a major for graphic design. And what was more, they made you take it in your junior semester, which I felt like was a colossal waste of time, because at that point, you know, you're looking at a bunch of other really important projects, and they're like, yeah, now sit down and write your name. Like, no, this is stupid. And I don't think calligraphy is stupid. I think calligraphy can be beautiful. I think it's a great hobby. And I want to emphasize hobby because for me, one of the arguments that I got into with the teacher was, it's like, yeah, this is a great hobby. It's not really a career option, you know, that we offer here, or something that like is really supported beyond this class. And that's what I was getting at, was like, look, all the other classes that we're taking right now, we were taking a publication class, we're taking advertising. It's like all of that is like, you know, there's more classes beyond this, and there's classes that connect to this, but this one is so disjointed from the rest of those. There's no like penmanship class, there's no like, I guess, stationery class or anything. There's none of that. And I have nothing against anyone who has, you know, makes calligraphy their living. You know, if you love doing it, do it. I have no problem with that. My problem is, it's when I'm forced to do it, when I'm so bad at it. But the funny thing was, what I found out very early in that class was it was a 1-credit class. And so very quickly I became like the teacher's nightmare, because I wouldn't really commit to any project in that class. Like obviously I would, you know, I would do the projects. I never slacked off like that. But I would not take them as seriously. I would come in and I would do like the assignment the day of. So, you know, people are turning their stuff in that they've worked on for weeks, and I was just like, here you go. And the dumb thing is apparently I was at least a little bit good at it, because I got like a B pretty much every time. I think I got a B in the class. So it was kind of like a weird scenario where it was like, this is the dumbest thing ever, I hate it. Also, I passed, like, with not flying colors, but, you know, more than the minimum for sure, because I think the minimum at that point, you know, it's like a C minus, or almost even a D, I guess. But that was the thing. It was just like, it was so dumb to have to sit down and just watch somebody with a pen take forever to write letters. And again, in any other circumstance, like if this was just like somebody demonstrating their artwork, not in a classroom setting where you're forced to, you know, duplicate it, and, you know, your whole semester hangs in the balance. Because for me, I was a double major, so I was doing 18 credit hours, plus I was working. So I had like little to no spare time to waste, and it just felt like, to me, that class was a big waste. And it was very frustrating, because I couldn't get anybody to tell me, it's like, why is this class required? And nobody had like a good reason, or like a a skill they could point to that was, you know, indicative of why this class should exist. And it's just like, it felt like padding. I'm like, this could have been like a lab, this could have been like some time to study, this could have been time for me to do anything else other than a skill that I'm just going to throw away. And I knew that, like, I wasn't going to use it because everyone that had gone on before me had all their supplies still, because they make you buy, like, you know, the big paper and all of that, but you're not going to use all of it for class. So there's plenty of that for free that you could just get. People would leave it out in the hallway or in the supply cabinets. You can go in there and just, like, you get it, all the pens you wanted, all the nibs and everything, and they're just like, it's like, dude, this is the dumbest class ever. You're gonna hate it. But yeah, I think of it constantly. What got me was, like, my version, because, like, I had done some calligraphy before, but it was all in Japanese with a brush and sumi ink, which is just like from what I understand, a Chinese or Japanese ink. And I'd practiced writing characters and working with these big flowing strokes with brushes. And then you know, the pens that they had us use felt very, I don't know, they just felt more obtuse to me. And I think, obviously, I think they were designed specifically for, like, the Romanized language of English as opposed to Japanese or Chinese. And it's like, I like working with the Japanese and Chinese language because it is some beautiful characters and some great work. But they're very much different, because I think that lends itself to a brush much more than the English calligraphy that we were doing. But then, of course, there's different fonts and such you can use. Oh, that was the other thing. There was a font book that you had to get. I'm like, can't we just look this up online? Like, no, what if you want to, you know, do a font or make a card? That was always their selling point. It's like, what if you want to make a card instead of buying one? I'm like, so I'm going to, instead of going to, like, the campus store and spending, like, maybe $4 or $5 on a card for somebody, it says get well soon, I'm gonna spend, like, hours on this card so that by the time I'm done, the person who I was gonna say get well soon is now better. Yeah, no. They could not sell that class on me. Try as they might. Alright, I need to do this string. That's the other thing I gotta do. I think I'll use a actual micron for that. Let me see, do I have... Let me just test this out. That one is garbage. Nice. What about this one? Is it garbage? That should be fine. Alright, let's make sure that everything's dry up here. Alright, line that up with the line I already made. Like so. Do this nice long bowstring. Stop. Keep going. Stop. Pull up. Very nice. Very, very nice. Okay. What I think I'm going to do now is I'm going to let this sit for about an hour and then come back and do the erasing. So then we can see where we need to refine some things, but then also where we can white out some things. And I'll show you how I do that. And yeah, hopefully there won't be too much more to do, because I think I'm actually somewhat happy with this. I say somewhat. I'm more happy with this than I thought I would be, because initially, like, when I sat down to do this, I'm like, let's get this over with. But now I'm looking at it like almost hopefully. I'm like, yeah, I think I like this a lot more. So I'm going to give it an hour, and we'll come right back. All right, let's see how we did. I've been needing my kneaded eraser during this whole time, so let's see if we can remove the pencils without smudging anything. I'm going in very lightly with just kind of some circular motion. If something does smudge, I'll be able to see it, hopefully, before I spread it all about with my eraser, but you never know. So, you know, you want to kind of go in, like, softly at first, but you still want to get the pencil out of the paper, so. Kind of in a broad circular motion. Seeing some pooling there on the ink, so I'm going to avoid that right there on the lettering. Come around here, get some of this stuff that we did yesterday, so this should be good. You can already see the difference between where we have the white out and the natural white of the paper, so we'll probably go over that again. Not a problem. It's so easy to forget where and when and how much you inked in certain places, and sometimes you'll leave out details that are kind of important to the drawing. So it's, you know, this is an important stage because you won't realize it till you go to scan it, how much you've forgotten, how much you left out of the drawing, and then you'll just kick yourself as soon as you see it, because then you gotta go back and you gotta draw it, and then you'll see something else, and then it'll be back and forth all day with it. I can't tell you how many times I've done that with comic pages. Always gets me super frustrated. Let's go nice and lightly here. Oh yeah, that's coming up nicely. Swap over to my rubber eraser. Try to clean up just a wee bit more. There we go. All right. Can see a few places I want to hit, but overall it's not as bad as I thought it would be. I think first things first, what I want to do is I want to take a... Do I have an available 0.8 micron? I have a 0.5. It looks to be alright. And I'll just strengthen up this line here where the belt is. Make it a little bit stronger around the outline. And then I'm going to take some pencil down here. And get that. And it's fine if you smudge something, because you can always go in. The next stage after this is white out, so you know you're already going to be whiting out some areas that, you know, maybe you think need more work. this eye. It's just that touch. Perfect. Alright, so with that, I'm gonna take... Where's a white pen I could get to? Behind my tripod. Some brilliance there. Don't worry, I have extras. These are Pentel Jelly Roll pens. Hold on. I think it's Pentel. It's not Pentel. So these are Jelly Roll pens. I don't know. They're from Japan. I don't really know who makes them, other than I guess the company Jelly Roll. They're really good. I've had these pens for a while. I've bought like 3 or 4 sets at this last store that I saw them in, just because I know that I like them. They work really, really well. They're not the solve-all for all of your inking problems, obviously. I think whiteout is still the best. But these are really good pens, especially if you have like I like using them for if I've got like black paper, or I've also seen people use it on like certain notebooks or sketchbooks that are maybe they've got like a gray paper or a like a sand colored, a tan notebook. I had one once and I really enjoyed using the white pen on that to give my highlights and my my drawings in general just a little bit of a boost. So here I'm just going to go through and kind of smooth out or roughen out some of these areas where I want the texture to kind of pop, some of the dark areas, or where I think there should be more light in general. You don't want to go overboard because you still want to keep the darkness of the pen that you've already added. Here. It's not as bad as I thought it would be, and I keep saying that because I genuinely, not just because I'm on camera, but like whenever I ink large pieces like this, I know I get excited, and I know like I get over enthusiastic with the ink, and sometimes I worry, or most of the time I worry that I will just ruin it with my over exuberance to get something inked. Because I've definitely done that before, and it's quite frustrating for me. But it's, you know, it's something you gotta live with. You gotta learn to live with your own tendencies, which sometimes is a little frustrating. You'll always be your own worst roommate in your mind. Because nobody else, you know, oh, he's getting in my head, or oh, I can't believe they've done this, I can't believe they're messing with my mind. Yeah, well, you're always your mind's worst roommate. Can't remember who I heard say that. It might be just been me, but earlier, but nice. So you can see here on the boot, I'm just adding a little bit more solid blacks here and there where I think that they would work. Just going back and forth from adding extra light and extra shadow. make the composition just really, really solid, really punchy. But does it sing to me? Almost to where the point where it sings to me. Really daggum close. Let me use the white gouache instead. So I'm just going to take this paper towel that I've got, and I'll fold it over. I've got a little bit of water here, so I'll just dip the paper towel in that. So I have a little moist spot there. I'm going to set that out and use a little bit of Artist Loft white gouache. Just a little, hardly anything. Hardly anything on there, but right on the moist part. So that much. I don't know, can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. I'm just going to take my brush, my dry brush, and go in and add that in nice and lightly over top of where I want the white to be. And this is how I get rid of large areas of ink that I shouldn't have put down. The nice thing about gouache is it's not as heavy as other paints, so it's not really going to eat into your drawing or to your board. And it's light enough so that you can go through and you can erase it almost with just like almost with your hand if you rub on it with just like a little moist towel. You don't want to use too much water with your gouache for this, at least, because it's going to be it's going to run, and you want to have as much control over it as possible for this bit. Although if you want to feather maybe some of the edges of your drawing, you could add a little bit of water, I suppose. Just let it run wild, but personally, for me, for right now, I'm going to leave it as paint heavy as possible. And a little bit of white here. That might be a job for the gel roll pen, though. Alright, let's go ahead and let's wash off our gouache. I don't know what gouache is technically made out of. I'm assuming it's like acrylic, where it's like some sort of plastic, or like not an organic substance, like oil paint or watercolor. I think you know, that's why maybe it's a little more forgiving on some things than some of those other natural based paints. Yeah. Nice. Very nice. What I like about using the gouache over the whiteout is that the gouache you can kind of draw over with the ink. The whiteout that I've got, you can't really do that. It forms kind of like a skin over the paper to where you can't really go back over. So I try to use the gouache first before I solidify things with maybe whiteout. You see it's already drying, but you can see like a little bit gets on my finger there. So think that's where that should go, and I might have to white out over that. Yeah, let me get that right now while I've got the gouache out. Nope. You can see I've got a little bit of water in there now. It's mixing with the wet ink. I should have waited a little bit for that to dry, but that's okay. Absorb some of that up with my brush. There we go. Alright, I'll leave that alone for now. That is what it is. That is what it is. What I might do now is a little bit of dry brushing. So let's get this brush here. What I do sometimes is I take the cap from my ink bottle. It doesn't have a lot of ink at the top right now. So what I'll do now is I'll grab a little bit of ink and I'll put it in the cap and kind of run it around with a textured top. And it's textured because of the ink sloshing around in the bottle. But what I'm doing is essentially drawing out my brush like so on the edge, so that before I go in, I'll use a paper towel as well in this case. It's not quite working. But yeah, there we go. I'll go in and I'll just kind of add these not fully black, not fully gray, kind of shading, smudge. Sometimes use my finger. And the brush is almost dry, so it's got this unique bit of texture to it as well that I like. But you can see how much that gives a nice bit of form there. How much that really affects the drawing. Oh, too much. There we go. Some absolute masters of dry brushing. I'm not one of them. I think of, right off the top of my head, I'm thinking of, I think I've seen Sean Gordon Murphy do it quite a bit. And I know that, I know I've seen others. I'm blanking on names today, which is unfortunate because usually I'm very good with artist names and very bad with people's names, and so I don't know what that says about my social skills, but yeah. There we go. And let's clean off that brush. That's the most important step. If you want to reuse the brush, you want to make sure you get all the ink out of it, so that you can use the brush over and over again until it's completely ruined. But yeah, I think I like this. I think I'm happy with this drawing. So what I'm going to do is, I think I'll just sign it now. And I want to thank you for watching. It's been a very long video, I'm sure, but hopefully worth it, hopefully entertaining for you, hope you learn some things. This is Whim, a character from a good friend of mine, and I'll probably be coloring this one, so look forward to that. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Go make something awesome.